Some factions saw ghouls and supermutants as walking abominations that had no place in post-war America. No faction condemned them more than the Enclave, the oldest faction in the Fallout world. The Enclave were made up of people who were the direct descendants of the US government and other high-ranking military personnel, including the president himself. They were responsible for building the Fallout shelters, the resource walls, the power armor, the forced evolutionary virus, and predicted that China would retaliate with a nuclear strike should their invasion of the mainland was successful. America's primary goal was wiping communism off the face of the earth to leave behind American supremacy, and in a way they were successful, purging the Red Menace from China and Russia in the resulting Great War, while America would survive and live on. Pre-selected Americans were safe in the vaults that the US government had built. Other high-ranking individuals retreated into similar government bunkers, and the most important officials would evacuate to an offshore oil rig, which was miles away from America's mainland, where they continued on with governmental affairs on behalf of their citizens. Being the only faction that existed before and after the Great War, they had a deep understanding of world history that others lacked. They also had access to military pre-war technology, such as power armor and direct energy weapons. The most advanced technology at their disposal was the fleet of vertibirds that they used for transport and military raids. These vertibirds were the world's last means of rotorcraft transport, giving the Enclave a strong advantage in military campaigns. The Enclave spent most of their time in the oil rig, building up their military forces and working in science labs to gain a technological edge over anyone that might have survived the Great War. Once America's radiation level was lowered to an acceptable level, they scouted America and discovered all sorts of mutated horrors roaming the wasteland, including supermutants and ghouls. The Enclave's vision was to restore America to its former glory, to bring back the exceptional American culture that was predominant before the resource wars and the Cold War, on behalf of all Americans who survived the Great War. The Enclave didn't see a place for super mutants, ghouls, and other mutations of the wasteland in this restored America, and so they actively created a plan to kill them all globally. The scientists in the Enclave would end up modifying the forced evolutionary virus into an effective toxin that would target and kill anyone who had been mutated by the forced evolutionary virus. This virus was no longer contained to bats, but had evolved to become airborne and infected every living organism in the wasteland, including humans, though earlier mutations were subtle and hardly noticeable. To the Enclave, the only true Americans that was worthy of preservation was the people who were not exposed to the radiation or the virus. This means that only the people who were connected to the Enclave, as well as the vault dwellers who were still isolated in the shelters, were pure enough to partake in democracy and live on in New America, while the others would die out and fade away. In Fallout 2, a conversation with the President Dick Richardson revealed that he didn't enjoy carrying out this genocide, but he didn't see any other way of restoring America to how it was. He was comforted to know that future generations would probably think of him as an American hero who was able to make the tough decisions. The Enclave's goal was similar to the Masters, that they both wanted to unify the wasteland through genocide and eventual replacement. While the Masters saw humans as inherently divided beings that will always cause conflicts until the unity, the Enclave saw mutants as abominations that had no right to exist in a united American country. These mutations also reflected the failures of American government, as it was through the Resource War, the Great War, and the forced evolutionary virus that created these horrors to begin with. Because the Enclave toxin also targeted humans that were already exposed to the airborne forced evolutionary virus, which included farmers, traders, and raiders, the Enclave were not sanctioned by anyone, and were considered enemies by most factions. If the Enclave redesigned the toxin to only only eradicate the super mutants, the ghouls, and the dangerous mutated animals, whilst leaving the rest of humanity alone, then the Enclave would probably be welcomed and supported by most people of the wasteland, as ghouls and super mutants were already heavily persecuted. But there probably wasn't a way for the Enclave to redesign the toxin to only target a specific strand of mutation without targeting them all. So while the marginalized deaths caused by the toxin would have been regrettable, they were considered acceptable losses if it meant restoring America to how it was. The Enclave and their toxin plan was defeated by the actions of the Chosen One in Fallout 2, as well as the Brotherhood of Steel in Fallout 3.